Laura Laine, let me say a few words about her. Laura has been a registered dietitian for over 30 years. Now, a dietitian is different than a nutritionist. You can become a nutritionist after a few days of training at this or that location, but a dietitian is a 4-year degree and does all of the sciences and such behind it. And she had worked at, for instance, at Texas Children's Hospital for over 22 years here in the Houston area as a dietitian. Now, she's also been a spiritual director, and she'll tell you a little of that story after working as an administrator for her Catholic church. And she's been a spiritual director for about 10 or so years. Am I telling the truth?
Since 2004.
Okay.
So almost 20. Yeah, almost 20.
Let's go with 20 then.
Yeah.
Almost 20 years. And she has integrated, or the way that I like to say it, and she can use whatever language you want, of course, but the way I think of it as integration, but also recognizing the wholeness that exists, that's already there, the wholeness that's there between life with God and our food, or how we receive the gifts of food and other gifts that nourish us and give us life. And she will be talking biblically, theologically about that today in one of her talks. She began the Sophia Grace Center, and as she puts it there on her website, where nutrition, health, and spirituality meet. I don't remember when I met you. It has been at least 10 years ago, I think, Laura. And Laura has done several pastor Sabbath retreats with me, a few, and has come and taught on nutrition and diet, and coached and met with a handful of Vineyard pastors over the years. And also, I'll say that she's helped me personally and helped my family in some significant ways. And so I've really been grateful for her expertise in being a dietitian and how she integrates it with her life and her faith. So will you please join me in welcoming Laura Laine?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I think from the time Chris and I met, we knew that we spoke the same language, which was so beautiful. So thank you for that introduction, and just to kind of springboard from that, so that's the springboards within to the talk. It's like, how did I get where I am today? So I have been a dietitian for 43 years. I can't believe I will be 65 years old this year. It's really hard to believe. But it's been a great journey. I became a dietitian at the encouragement of my mother when I showed up at the hospital where she worked one day, and she said, "I know what you need to be." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "A dietitian." I said, "Great, I'll be that. What is it?" And so she told, "And why do you think I should be it?" And she said, "Because you love science and you love food." So I'm Italian. Italians are all about food, faith, and family. And yes, we say it in that order: food, faith, and family. And when we eat at the table, we not only eat at the table, we talk about what our next meal will be. So Italian people are very incredibly passionate people who pretty much follow the Mediterranean diet. And so I got a lot of this totally from my culture. I'm Sicilian by birth, by my family origin, which means that in my family we're farmers and grocers. My grandparents were grocers. My grandpa was a butcher. My grandmother ran the store. Most of them came from the Brazos Bottom, which is all about farming. So this has just been in my blood, just this passion that, that I love. So flash forward, while I was at Children's, I worked a lot with eating disorders. And one of the things I noticed a lot was the demise of the family table, And the family table had been something that's always been important to me. Even with my children, even though they were competitive gymnasts, we still had the family table, even if it was 9:30 at night, because that was important. And what I feel so happy that I have passed on to my children, which one is 34 and one is 30, is their love for food, for the preparation of food, and for the table, as well as passing along their faith, which all goes together, which I'm getting ready to show you. So fast forward from that, I got a call from my pastor when he became pastor to be his parish administrator. It was one of those things where you jump in and you say yes before you know what it is. So just as all of you all have done, because if you knew what it was going to entail, you would have said no and ran as fast as you could. So as you know, working for a church is not easy, and working for a church, you're at the center of the spoke of Christ's mission. And the center of the spoke of Christ's mission, just like we see in the Holy Land, there continues to be dissension and distress and wars and insurrections and everything else. And it happens in all of our own individual churches as well. But what I learned sitting behind that desk as a dietitian administrator was I would ask God every day, why in the world would you put a dietitian behind the desk as a parish administrator? And I heard clearly Jesus say, because I'm the ultimate of dietitians. I am all about food and hunger. And if you look in scripture, there are more references to food and hunger than there are to faith, because God knew by using that metaphor that it really attracted us, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Jesus said, come to me and I will give you that living water and you'll never have to come to this well again. I will take you to the land of milk and honey. That land of milk and honey is that land of your cookie dough and your ice cream and your tres leches and your flan, right? It's taking you to a place of extreme passion where you have as much food, as you need, and the food that you like. In biblical times, honey was a very rare resource. It was found in the rock. And the rock was, so there wasn't much honey. So it was a very precious resource. So God knew when he used that imagery, people would know that that meant plentiful. So we have a prodigal God. We hear of the prodigal son, but it's really a prodigal God who is lavish and wasteful and gives us every single opportunity to know him. And God is even willing to throw seeds our way that may not even go into our soil, but hopefully one day they will get into that soil and they will grow and they will be able to feed others, 130, 60 times over, right? So this first talk that I'm getting ready to do is going to be the What Would Jesus Eat? Now, I did not come up with this name on my own, but as you remember, this is back, gosh, I don't even know if it was like when I was in high school or wherever it was, they had that What Would Jesus Eat? What would Jesus do? Bracelets, right? So there was this doctor, he's a family medicine physician, his name, Don, it escapes me now, but it's on one of y'all's handouts. But anyway, he said, if we follow Jesus in everything we do, why not follow Jesus and the way Jesus eats as well? So what I'm going to attempt to do with this particular talk is I am going to take you through what biblical eating is, what Jesus would have followed, and move it forward into what we as dietitians and health experts know continues to be the healthiest way to eat for our bodies. But as you will notice, it's not just about the food that we put in our mouth. And as what Chris was saying, is what I have gone into in my practice is we have a Eucharistic table, how God feeds us at church, at Mass, however that is. God feeds us in word and spirit and also in each other. But with the demise of the family table, we no longer have that feeding around that table with our companions. And our companions are the people who I share my bread with. And when we share around a table, we're not just sharing the bread of food, we're sharing the bread of our hearts. And that's what truly feeds. Now that researchers have seen that in the hierarchy of needs, it's not that a mother is the most important piece of a child's life because the mother provides food. The mother is the most important piece because the mother is the mother, and that the food that the mother gives in the love and companionship and everything is of the highest value. When I worked at Children's, I saw children that were failure to thrive who had enough food, but they weren't thriving because they were at daycare all day, all different kinds of reasons they didn't have what it was. So this is how primal this is, and these attachments that we have not only to our moms, but to our dads and to each other. We thrive in communion. We don't thrive in isolation. And eating at the table is communion. Okay. Okay, here we go. All righty. So what would Jesus eat and how can we follow his example? So as you see here, you can see the just this picture right here. This picture right here makes me so incredibly hungry because to me, it's so passionate. It's got the wine and it has honey and it has the word of God and the olives. All of this is so representative of what the Mediterranean diet would be. And we'll go on. Does anybody else think this is passionate? I just think it's just a passionate picture. It makes me very hungry, with all of the things that mix and match within there. So what would Jesus eat? So Jesus, I want to show you these different dietary principles and how Jesus would eat. And then we're going to go into what's called the blue zone, the healthiest people in the world. Let me do this. And we're going to compare all of these biblical traditions and see how we kind of can fall into this trap in our world and try to believe what Google says is the best thing about eating. We as dietitians spend more time debunking theories than anything. So we'll look at biblical examples, and then we're going to go into what we call the choose my plate method. And I have a handout that you guys have, which is what would Jesus eat? And we're going to use that for some of the questions when you guys go into your small group. And then we're going to consider change as ways that we can foster change within our life so that we can really have the Lord give us this day our daily bread, because God is always trying to give us things, but we're not taking what that bread may be. Okay, so what is nutrition in the Bible? It's a celebration of the fresh elemental foods, herbs, spices, and oils. And what we've come to know, there's a dietitian that does what's called the genomic kitchen. It's not just the food, it's if you study the food of different cultures, and I loved hearing what you all had to say here, you know, pho and gnocchi and Filipino oxtail soup and kabi, peanut stew, all those things. What's so fascinating about each one of the cultures is all of these cultures use the spices and the foods of their area that Jesus gave them, that God gave them to produce this food that's going to provide the bioavailable nutrients for this body to grow and to thrive. What we know about the human body that people don't think about is within our stomach, within our intestines, we have 4 to 6 pounds of microbiota. That is bacteria. And that bacteria is very, very important. And it needs to be fed properly every day. It needs to be fed both by nutrients, that probiotics that come from the fermented dairies that we'll see in these Mediterranean climates or cultures, as well. It needs to be fed by prebiotics that you're going to find in things like whole grains and fruits and vegetables. And why is this microbiota important? It's actually called our second brain. But the one thing we do know is that 95% of the serotonin in your brain, which is that feel-good hormone that many of us might take antidepressants for, is produced in your gut. So we are seeing more and more depression and anxiety in young children. Why are these things happening? I think there's an aspect of lifestyle, but I also believe it's also the food that we're feeding them. So we're going to see in here, we're going to see that in this food in the Bible, it's not just the food, it's also these herbs that we put on top of them, these herbs and these spices and this oil. If you look at even just the different Middle East way of eating, each one of those countries will have a different spice mix. And it is very important to those countries that you honor what that spice mix is. It may, some may use cumin, some may use cardamom, some may use this, that, or the other. And those differences touch the hearts and souls of these people. And when they eat foods with those flavors, they know that it's their food from this origin that they grew up with. And it's not just that connects them to their culture and to themselves. These herbs actually enhance the nutrient availability of each one of these of the nutrients within and inside these foods. So nutrition in the Bible was high in fiber, it was low in cholesterol, it was fresh food with a very moderate meat intake. If you look biblically, you'll notice that the times that meat was eaten was on the highest celebratory times, which would have been the fatted calf. I was always amazed at how they could just take that fatted calf in one instant, kill it, gut it, cut it up, and prepare it and have a meal on the table, right? It sounds so quick in the Bible, but we know it wasn't that quick. But that was for the high, that was for days that were very special. But normally they were probably eating things a little bit more local and from the ground, more like fowl and fish and those kinds of things. We saw grass-fed meats during that time, which we're finally coming back with that. And that's what a lot of these things are coming back as these designer foods, if you will. Which were supposed to be that way in the first place. The animals were supposed to be treated kindly when God gave us dominion over all of the animals and the birds and everything else. Dominion didn't mean domination. It didn't mean that I use these animals and then I feed them poorly. for my own gain and for my monetary. We need to be very, very grateful for every animal, every fruit, every vegetable, every dairy product that was provided to us by these animals. This is a very, very holy union that we have with these animals, and it needs to be treated as such. And when I talk to people, I say, if you can't afford these, you would want to buy things that are grass-fed or where the animals are raised more kindly. If you can't, that's fine. And I would rather that people have their available food. But the reason why we do that is we're also supporting very healthier practices, if you will. Fresh wild fish, not fish that's grown in tanks and is farm raised. Why? Because these fish in these farm raised areas are not getting the food that they should have, which means that the matrix of the fish is not going to be as healthy for us, right? As well as being grown in these small environments, they're more open to disease and everything else. And I want to eat a fish that's a happy fish that got to run around and get the kinds of foods that it wanted to get, not fish that was being forced into this small area. Fermented dairy, those, the yogurts, the kefirs. One thing about being Italian is we kind of have part of our taste buds, or at least mine and my family's, we do like some bitter flavors. My husband is Polish and Finnish, and he just does not understand why I would drink kefir or buttermilk. And I'm just like, oh my God, I love it. Like, it's so good, and his yogurt's a little bit sweeter yogurt than the yogurt that, that I would eat. But I just love that little bit of that kind of a flavor within there. And then it's high in vegetables and in fruits, versus the American diet, which you would see meat as this primary source of, man and the meat, but most of the people in these places did not have meat as a huge, huge portion. So this is the blue zones. You do have a piece of paper that says Genomic Kitchen on the top of it. This is one of your handouts if you copied it out. It's kind of an algorithm, and it talks about what are the blue zones and what are their traits. So let me explain to you the reason why it's called blue zones. It's kind of a little bit of it's not really a misnomer, but it's called blue zones because the people from Life I think it was Life magazine. It was one of these magazines that went out to try to find out the healthiest people in the world. And in these healthiest people in the world, they wanted to know what caused them to be these healthiest people in the world. So what does the healthiest people in the world mean? It means that these people are living up into their hundreds, and not just into their hundreds, but they're living into their hundreds healthily in body, mind, and spirit, meaning we're not seeing a level of dementia, Alzheimer's, break down the body, all of those kinds of things. They came up with these zones. Once they found the zone, they circled it with blue ink, and therefore it was called the blue zones, okay? So one of the links that I think Kim sent you was a link for How to Live to Be 100 by a man named Dan Bettner. This is one of his oldest ones. It's back in 2009, but it's just a short little 20-minute TED Talk that just explains so well about why these places are living in longevity. And we long for what these people do because in our American lifestyle, it's all about going, making money. It's not what Jesus taught. Jesus was of dominion, not domination. Dominion, not domination, which means there's enough for everybody. So we saw these places like Sardinia, Italy, and Icaria, Greece, and Okinawa, Japan, and Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California, and now there's even more blue zones. And there are some cities that are trying to become these blue zones as well. So what are the commonalities that we see within these? So we see that they have the right outlook, okay? They know how to downshift every single day. They know how to relax. What does downshift mean? Downshift means that, they've gone from this work a day and able to start coming down during the day and do less and less and less so that they can kind of go into that evening. And our body is made for that. And we're going to see that more in the next presentation, but our body was not meant to be turned back on at 6 o'clock after dinner and answer emails and do this, that, and the other. That's not how our bodies were made. Our bodies were made like those of y'all that are old enough to know this show, but I always likened it to Andy Griffith, where after dinner, Aunt B and Andy and Opie and whoever else went out onto the porch and he played his guitar and they sang and just talked under the stars. That's what's really supposed to happen. Because what happens when we don't do that is we just increase this cortisol level in our body. We're making our body go past what it's supposed to be. And this inflammatory process is what's causing us all of our problems. The 80% rule, and that 80% rule is when I am filled about 80%, that I will will kind of start stopping eating. Okay, I'll start feel it when I am at that point. I'm sorry, number 2, where it says that know your purpose. What is that know your purpose? It's like, why am I here in life? And I don't think any of us really totally know why we're here in life, but really in the end, if we summarized it by what Jesus does, we're all here to love. We were created out of love and we're here to love. And however we love with our different temperaments, with the different vocations that have been chosen for us, whatever that is, that's what our purpose is. It's not as big and I don't know, outer spacious as we try to think, what it is. It's probably much more simple, but then to love is not always the easiest thing either. So then there's a plant slant. Number 5, you see the plant slant. So they tended to eat more fruits and vegetables, was the highest part of their pyramid, if you will. And then the meat did not take priority. The meat was a lower piece of that. They didn't center the food around the meat, if you will. Number 6, I apologize, should have corrected the slide, but the wine is cut out. It's called Wine at 5. I do a lot with addictions. And so I teach a lot of people that have drug and alcohol addiction. And I'm sure you guys work with plenty of people with addictions, but when you work with people with addictions, an addiction will take whatever it is and run. It'll say, you know what? Laura said, I need to have wine at 5. So when I teach this with them, I say, absolutely can't have wine at 5. You can get your nutrients from other places from this wine. Nor is, and this is what people take out of context. Yes, wine is great. It's got polyphenols in it. It's something that helps us, but so do grapes and so do lots of other things. We don't have to have the wine, but the wine can kind of give us that excuse that, I guess the literature can give us that excuse that that's what we need to have. So people that do struggle with this, the teaching is I'm sorry, whoever loves tiramisu, those people can't have tiramisu either, because tiramisu has alcohol in it and it doesn't cook out all the way, and it will stimulate that dopamine in the brain center. And before they know it, they're not just eating tiramisu, they're eating everything else. So I tell people they can't have kombucha because it's a fermented, tea, if you will. And I had this one client, she goes, I know, I believe you. She goes, I drank kombucha. The next thing I knew, I was adding vodka to my kombucha, So, and the funniest story I ever heard was some people that lived in Costa Rica. And every morning they woke up to this thump, 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 thump. When they went out and these iguanas were on the ground on their back like this. Well, the fruit in their tree had fermented. So they're eating this fruit. And so they were drunk. So it was like drunk iguanas, So I just wanted to show that there are, and great, if you're an iguana, you can be drunk. It's all good. So, and then the other parts of this is family is first. Family is first. Franklin Covey will say in the Franklin Covey, I know nothing except the one square that says your family is important, but it's not urgent. When your family becomes urgent, it means that we need to look and see what are we not doing within our families. And so often when our family becomes urgent, meaning maybe it's one of our children or somewhere in the family, something has kind of fallen offline, that person could be the canary in the mine that's saying, hey guys, we need to regroup. We need to come back. We need to retreat. We need to start things over. And in my practice, I'll often have parents come and they want to blame the child for whatever it is, but it's like, wait a minute, let's circle back and let's see what's going on in the family. It's not about correcting whatever the person has with disease. It's trying to step back and say, how in the heck did I get here in the first place? Okay, how did I get here in the first place? So I also just want to take this moment to also say, when I say family first, and we're going to go on to this more in the next one, but it's about the order of relationships. The order of our relationships is always the person and God, the person and their spouse if you are married. After that is the person and their children. After that, it's your vocation. And after that, it's your leisure time and fun and everything else. So you guys that are, that are pastors and working in parishes and things like that, y'all's vocation is shaped a little bit differently than like the priestly vocation in the Catholic Church, where this is one of the reasons why it's in some ways kind of hard to work for a Catholic church, because in the priestly vocation where they don't marry, and that's celibate one, their highest vocation is their vocation. I mean, there is their vocation because they don't have marriage, they don't have children, whatever. But you all, and this is what's hard to kind of get straight because everybody's coming at you all the time, is to still make all of those things priority, and then your vocation will fall into place. And we'll go over that more the next time. To belong to something greater than myself, to belong to a group. As I said, human beings were meant to be in communion. They weren't to live in isolation. And be kind of part of the right tribe. What does that right tribe mean? It means those people that just get you, those people that are of you. It's not codependent relationships. It's not making yourself fit in. We're never supposed to change ourselves to be part of a group. Instead, we need to first belong to ourself and God who created us, and then we can belong to everybody, okay? If you change yourself to fit in, you have not been who God created you to be. So we are all children of God, and and one of my favorite things is in Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter says to Alice, when Alice says in her adult phase, says that, oh, that's impossible. The Mad Hatter says, I don't even know you anymore. Alice, I know, would have never said that. He said, you have lost your muchness. So what does losing your muchness means? We never want to lose our Kimness, our Chrisness, our Jenniness, any of those things. That is who we are in our essence that God created us to be, okay? Above and beyond everything else. And that's what we give to people. That is our vocation. Okay, so let me get this going down again. Okay, so a woman is just walking on the road. I love this picture. One of my favorite things to do is walk, because when we walk, we're fed everywhere by all of the sights and the sounds and the people that cross our paths. I think it's great to walk without headphones in and really just see what God is going to say to us. And we'll talk about this more in the next one. Okay, so what is this? What was our food supposed to look like? So this is kind of a picture of what the rich soil would be in Nazareth. So what is this rich soil? So technically what's supposed to happen with soil, and if you look at this scripturally, one of my favorite scriptures is all about the sower and the seed, right? So God talks about all the different types of soil. Is it rocky soil? Is it soil that has thorns that you get the word and you're so excited, but then your life chokes it off? Or is it that kind of soil that some of it kind of comes up and then it kind of just scorches? Or is it this rich soil? So in farming terms, what is rich soil? Our crops should be rotated, meaning we have one field that lays fallow. Nothing is growing in that field because it's worked hard the year before. It worked hard. And when it worked hard, it used all the nutrients up. So we need it to lay fallow for a year so that it can get those nutrients back up, the right kinds of, bacterias and worms and all those other kinds of things that it needs. And then we grow on the other one, right? But this is one of the things that's not often happening in our world. Yes, we've got organic and we have regular, whatever, but we really need to get back to this. And it's the same thing for our lives. When we don't let our life lie fallow, have a day, have a Sabbath, have an hour, how is God going to enrich that earth that's within our hearts? So just a few food terms that are also used biblically. The word enrich means things were taken out and they need to be put back in. So that would be like white bread. It's enriched with things that was taken out of it, right? But in our lives, all during the week and the day and everything else, things are seeping out of us because we're giving to other people or things are happening or whatever. And we need God to enrich that soil again every single day. And we have to take enough time for God to enrich that soil. And then fortify means to put things in that weren't there to begin with. So if we look at that fortification of God, I mean, that is like, to me, it's the gifts of the Spirit, that wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, knowledge, piety, fear of the Lord, right? It's all those things that God fortifies us with and gives us that we have to use. But oftentimes we don't think that we have those things to use within us. So, and it takes slowing down and God to remind us, hey, I fortified you with courage. I fortified you with wisdom and understanding, and call on me to bring this out. We need to respect the earth. The earth is something that God gave us. Said, I give you dominion over the earth. Okay. The earth is wasting away right now as we know it. And things that do not have a voice, like the earth, like the animals, don't really get center stage. Okay. And we think that we can take care of them. I'm in a program now through the Oblate School of Theology. It's called the Forest Dwelling Program. Forest dwelling comes kind of, I think, in the Hindu terms, but it's kind of that third stage of life where when you're going into midlife, which probably some of you guys are in, but it's where we are now going into a time of our life of unknowing. But in a forest, trees take care of each other and we can't see how it happens. If one tree is dying, other trees will spread their roots out to it to help that tree to live. So this is what we're called to do in our life, as opposed to run away from everybody and keep it all for ourselves. So we want to produce this nutrient-rich soil, both in what we consume in food, which when we consume things like this in food, our body responds in kind. Our body does not have the inflammation that it would. But if we're eating things that are more processed or more genetically modified, all of those kinds of things, this is when our body is not able to respond in kind. And then we get mad at our bodies, right? Our poor bodies are so picked on by ourselves, and our body does nothing. Our body is totally in service of our head, okay? Most of our life is run by the neck up, right? All right, so what is this holy eating? Holy eating involves celebration and dining and food symbolism. One thing about the Christian faith is we have in many ways forgot food symbolism. If you go back into the Jewish faith and the Hindu faith, people that celebrate Ramadan, celebrating the Passover in the Jewish faith, the Passover is a celebration and a remembrance. Those bitter herbs that they eat are a remembrance of the slavery they were in. The lamb that they eat is celebration of that, or is remembrance of the Passover, how the angel of death passed them over. The hyacinth, all of that is representative of the mortar that would have been in the bricks for when they were in slavery. So all of these things have symbolism. The egg, the symbol of new life, which we see also on Easter. So everything in this Passover meal we have taken over into our Christian traditions as well, which the word is always read in church, right? So we're fed with the word, and then we're fed also with each other, and also fed with that Eucharistic body. So food as symbolism. Holy eating embodies seasonal eating. Nowadays, we can get foods from anytime, anywhere, anytime, right? Because we all over, right? It's also time of Thanksgiving. I need to thank this animal. I need to thank the people around the table that prepared it. I need to thank the grocer. I need to thank the farmer. There's a lot of people that need thanks. It's the 3 times a day that we come in contact with death. Something had to die for us to live. Something had to die for us to live. And we just do not appreciate that. I mean, the food wasting that we have today is just horrible. My sister will call, she goes, what are you making? And I'll say some concoction. She goes, oh, okay, what's about to go bad? And so I pride myself on figuring out what's about to go bad and figuring out something to cook, out of that so that we can have that. And it's fun, fasting. I'll touch more on that in the next one. Religious observance, remembering. I break that word apart because it means to be put back together, to come back together. And we allow God to feed us in body, mind, and spirit if we take that proper amount of time at the table, which that's the other thing that we don't do. So this is what we call the Mediterranean pyramid. The pyramid shows, if you can see the way this pyramid is shaped, is the very bottom of this pyramid. You can see fruits, vegetables, olive oil, all of that. That's the base of everything for them. The next level you see there is more fish and seafood. So in biblical eating, in Mediterranean eating that we continue to see today, it's already following all of the healthiest guidelines that we keep proposing in life. It's already happened. You know, there's nothing new under the sun, nothing new under the sun. But we think that we can create all this stuff and we can make our own protein powders and we can make our own, I don't know, protein bars and all this other kind of stuff and pronounce that this is the best thing in all, you know, in the whole world, you know, but nothing is better than what God already made for us, right? Then we see the cheese and yogurt, and the very top is that meats and sweets. And sweets, as Chris said, yes, all foods can fit. And eating sweets is not a bad thing. The thing that has happened in our world, though, is that because many of us have as much money as we want, or there's also a lot of cheap, bad food, we have started having what's called disordered eating, and that we're using food for the wrong reasons. We're feeding something is off in our soul that we're hungry for, and we're feeding it in a tangible way. My life is not sweet. I need Twinkies. I would never choose a Twinkie. I would choose chocolate ice cream, and I would choose, whoever said cookie dough is a person after my own heart. Yes, my husband always thinks I'm making cookies for him, but I really make it because I've got a craving for the dough that day, right? So, and he doesn't get cookie dough. I don't know why he doesn't get it, but me and my kids get cookie dough. So anyway, my little, you know, sneaky secret there. You can see the wine is crossed off again there today, but that can also be a part of it. And then drinking water. So, and oftentimes we're really thirsty, but we think we're hungry. We get it confused. And then this is just, you know, fresh fruits and vegetables, you know, nothing's better. Like for kids, take kids to a farmer's market, let them see fresh foods. I remember I had a family that was from, it was when I taught in the inner city, and these families from Mexico said, you know, when we shop in the grocery store here, my kids are not attracted to any of the fruits and vegetables because they don't smell like anything. But when you go to the mercado in Mexico and you're in there, I mean, if peaches are screaming at you, the fresh, all of the things, you're smelling the smell of everything. So you're attracted to wanting to eat it. Like when I see people buying peaches in December, I go, really, what the heck are you doing? You know, it's hard enough to find a good peach even in the summer, but unless a peach, I can smell it, I'm not buying that peach, you know, because I know it's not going to be the peach that I want. So Jewish saying is, anyone who eats and drinks but does not bless the Lord is a thief. I think it's a great proverb. The ritual is one, the food is one, we who offer the food are one, the fire of hunger is one, all action is one, and we who understand are one. That's a Hindu blessing. So it just shows community, communion. The U.S. dietary guidelines are the same as everything I just told you. Focus on fruits, vary your vegetables, eat whole grains, get calcium-rich foods, manage your portions, lower the amount of saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol. I always have to laugh about how eggs were made such a villain for so many years when people were concerned about cholesterol. No one was talking about the double meat bacon Whopper. They were talking about eggs, honestly, really. So eggs were taken off the naughty list back in 2015. So please enjoy your egg. And the egg yolk is more beneficial than the egg white. It has more protein in it and has more nutrient value than the egg white. The poor egg white has been so lonely, and the poor, you know, egg yolk has just felt so left out all this time, when look what all it provides. So, I mean, the yolk is where the chicken comes from. Why wouldn't it be the one that has all of the different nutrients in it? So, but this is how all this stuff is taken out of context, right? Vary your sodium, your added sugars, and move for 1 hour a day. So we want to have these, you know, fruits, grains, and vegetables. And you can see this is the Choose My Plate. It's divided up into all these different, into these different food groups. And so here's a saying, a biblical saying: your threshing shall last until the time of your vintage, and the vintage shall last until the time of sowing. You shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in the land safely. So God promises us that we will have enough food. We don't need to hoard it. When the people tried to hoard the manna, what happened? It went rancid, okay? The people were so scared they weren't going to have the right amount of food, right? And he even let them have it twice on the Sabbath so they could have a day off, okay? The vegetables, what are these vegetables? They give us antioxidants, phytonutrients, vitamins, mineral, color. And what did God say? God said, see, I've given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of this earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seeds. To you, it shall be your food. And then we have fruits. It's fresh, fragrant, open, the colors of the rainbow. The colors of the rainbow are God's covenant. Every color in that rainbow provides us a different set of nutrients. That's a great way to get kids to eat. It's like, okay, kids, this is red week. We're only eating things that are red. And saying it's not going to be red Skittles, not going to be red Starburst. It's going to be tomatoes and strawberries and all those kinds of things. So, and kids love that. They love games. So fruits and vegetables. And then here is going to be the curds from the cattle and the milk from the flock. So I've come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, to bring them up from the land to good and large land that's flowing with milk and honey, But we prefer our protein bars and our protein powder, but not what God wants to give us. I mean, God's just up there just going, really, people, really, 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 why are you trying to make something different? Come on. Okay, protein. So protein, I love this rule. It says you shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. It sounds horrible, right? I mean, it sounds so sad when you hear it that way, but there's even a rule like that, right? And moreover, you shall not eat any blood in any of your dwellings, whether of bird or beast. Now, what we know, when Jesus came along, Jesus made all food good. And even Peter saw that symbol of all of this food coming down on a sheet that said, you shall eat. And Peter was, no, I can't do that. But he knew that that's what God was saying, and that now the message was going to be taken to the Gentiles, and that all food is good, and God has pronounced that. He said to them, have you any food here? This is a post-resurrection gospel. They see Jesus on the beach. He gives them a piece of broiled fish and honeycomb. When I was a kid, as a Catholic, you could not have anything. You had to fast till you went to mass. And so whenever it was food scriptures, even though I probably didn't like fish then, it sounded so incredibly good because I was so hungry, and so you really, really loved the taste of the Eucharist at that time. And what you loved even more was the donuts in the parish hall after mass. So yes, that Eucharist. And then this is our healthy fats. Fat is like another naughty word, but you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. So these are all those healthy oils that we see and that we need in our diet. So we want to have this great soil so that we grow. And Jesus did all of this. And we'll see more of that as we go into the next presentation. So I'm going to give it back to Chris now. And you tell us what we're going to do next.
Great. Thank you, Laura. What we're going to do for the next 7 or so minutes is just do a time of question and answer. So let's take about 20 seconds to 30 seconds of silence and just notice this. What questions are arising for you? So you've heard this first presentation. It helps you to shut your eyes and take a breath. That's fine. But just think about it. What question is emerging from something she said, something on one of the slides? As you're thinking about something in your own life or your family's life, what question is arising for you? And when you're ready, just type it into the chat. And Laura and perhaps I will sort through those, and we'll have a few minutes for her to respond, and then we'll go to a small group, and then we'll take a break. What questions are arising for you? If you would type those in the chat whenever you're ready. So, Laura, I'll ask one as people are typing and getting ready. I mean, there are parallels that you're making between the Mediterranean diet of Jesus' day and what is considered like the blue zone eating, that healthy diet. Mm-hmm. And the theologian in me is thinking, okay, not everything in that given culture is somehow good and blessed just because Jesus happened to be in it.
Mhm.
Right? And so, and yet you're making a case, like theologically, because Christ ate this way, and then scientifically, hey, it matches what we consider healthy eating to be healthy for us. So I just want to notice that and then let you respond to that. You know, it's like invoking the authority of Christ and science to say this is what is healthy. That's a really powerful argument. And I guess the wondering is, just because Jesus was in it doesn't necessarily make it healthy, right? So anyway, that may just be my weird, strange question, but it may not be a question other people are asking.
No. I mean, I think it's a good question. I mean, I guess the one thing that probably wasn't there at that time was so much of these processed foods and everything wasn't there. Did the people have palates that they liked things that were sweet? Yes, they did. But what did they do for that? They did what they had. So it would have been eating dates, which are something that are very natural and very incredibly sweet. They would probably use some of that honey, those things. So they didn't have, food was not, what it wasn't done was, food was not as plentiful as it was today. Actually, people that were wealthy and overweight, that was considered something that was what you wanted to do. It was a sign of being rich, okay? Because they did have as much food as they wanted. But the people then, because they didn't have everything, and they were totally dependent on God to rain down the rain and grow these crops and those kinds of things, they had much more reverence for the food. So I can't think of anything, Chris, actually, that during that time that would have been an unhealthy food. However, what I could say is even those people that used their wealth and ate as much food as they did were probably unhealthy people, or following an unhealthy lifestyle, just as the people would be today.
That's a wonderful contrast. I love that, because in our day and time, we do have food challenges that they just simply did not have in the Mediterranean times in the time of Jesus.
Correct. We're essentially living the desert, so much of the desert that Jesus went into, but instead of it being a desert with no food, for us as Americans, there are plenty of people around the world that do not have food. And that's what's so crazy. You know,
very good.
So
we've got several good questions over here. Just take a moment, Laura, and read those and see which one you want to respond to.
Well, I want to respond to this first one that says, how do we get our children on board with eating this way? And what I have found in the families that I deal with is I feel like parents have somehow deemed themselves powerless over technology, over the food kids eat or whatever. And yes, you're dealing with children are in this food culture where there's so many different things coming at them, but it's still us as parents, it's our responsibility to rein that in and sit around the table. I will tell you, my children, I thought I was going to eat romaine lettuce and carrots for the rest of my life because those were the two vegetables my children liked. However, both of them are connoisseurs of everything because my husband and I continued to eat. So the main thing you should do is model and eat with your children. The other big mistake is I see parents eating separately saying, well, I don't like the foods my kids eat. Well, who made those food choices for the kids? Okay. And you also start slowly, continue to introduce slowly with what you do. But that's a loaded question there. So, and one I'm very passionate about. Okay. Good. For wine at 5, how much is literal and how much is figurative? There is some, there supposedly, I mean, there are health benefits from wine, but it's not something that you have to have. I think that's the confusing piece of it. You know, even being Italian, I know like within me, I love a glass of wine, but my stomach doesn't like it. I don't have the enzymes in my liver that break it down very well. So I'm one of the people that I would much rather have chocolate ice cream over wine, if you will. So in these cultures, they may have had wine at 5 and there is some nutritional benefit to it, but it's still something that we had in moderation. And the general recommendation is 1 glass a night for women and 2 glasses for men. And beyond that, it starts moving into something that is unhealthy. How do we think about the food pyramid that you shared and hosting of several people and or groups of people with a variety of food? Okay, so that's very interesting. It's a great question. If you go, and this is one of the things as dietitians, my favorite aspect of dietitians is dietetics is food and culture. So if you go to, it's called, just look up Mediterranean diet. Oh, here, I know what it is. It's called Old Ways. I think it's, oh, here it is. Old Ways, OLDWAYS, PT, P as in Paul, T as in Tom, .org. If you go on there, they have a pyramid for every different culture. And it's fascinating. It shows how you achieve the Mediterranean diet, but within these different cultures. And we as dietitians, because the food of the culture is so incredibly important to the spirituality and the culture of the people, we have to be very careful not to say, oh, well, you can't have naan anymore, or you can't have roti, or you can't have this or that. We show them how to incorporate it in and eat it in moderation, just like we would do with any culture. Great question. So I'm going to go to, first I'm going to go to gluten. How do we manage gluten intolerance? We see the need for whole grains in our diet. Modern farming practices has changed the molecular structure of wheat. Yes. Okay. So with that, like, there are some people truly that have gluten intolerance. I think we're seeing it much more in America than we are in some of the other countries. And that is because we have modified a lot of it. Now, if you look at research on this, what they're also saying about our American culture, this is way before COVID, is that there's some aspect of like almost we're using like all of those hand sanitizers, this is before COVID, so much that we're also actually killing a lot of our good bacteria that we need for our microbiota. Some aspects of gluten intolerance are kind of more from the autoimmune aspect of it. But I know myself for a lot of these refined grains, those hurt my stomach too, but whole grain doesn't hurt my stomach. So we would teach people how to modify. If they could have rice, if they could have quinoa, if they could have corn and other forms of whole grain, we would move them into that. There are plenty of gluten-free products that are just as low nutrient value as things that have gluten in them. So let me put it that way. I mean, Betty Crocker has a whole line of gluten-free. Okay. And the other thing we're finding about the gluten piece, it's not just the GI. We are seeing some people that have like a brain fog, arthritis, those kinds of things. So we're having to honor that piece of it within it. So we modify it.
That sounds great. I think in our small group discussion, one of our discoveries was many of us had to confess that we don't eat vegetables as much as we, as this diet proposes. And we did find that, yeah, we are eating vegetables at times and places that we may just be less aware. So that was one of our takeaways from our small group discussion. I tell you what, as people are coming back on and Laura is preparing to talk, what we might do at the end of this time is go to our small groups first and then do Q&A afterwards. But we're going to turn to a similar subject, a little different focus. And can you see on there, let's see, Marissa and Marshall, I typed the title, What Truly Nourishes Finding Joy in Balanced Living. Is that on your chat screen? Okay, great. So Laura is going to take us into that talk now. So take it away, Laura.
This one is called Finding Joy in Balanced Living. As we know, joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Joy is different than happiness. When we have joy inside of us, we have this feeling, if you will, that it's almost like something from beyond, okay? So the different pictures that you see in here are what we're kind of going to go through in this talk. In that in order to be balanced, we have these rituals that we need in our life that need to be a part of our life most every single day. My favorite picture on here is the little girl in the center that's praying. And what I tell people is that, how do we know what we're supposed to do in life? How do we know how we're supposed to lead life? How do we know where we're even supposed to get our food in body, mind, and spirit unless we center our life in prayer? So, Lord, teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain wisdom of heart. Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain wisdom of heart. So what does that mean? It means, how is my day going to look? What's the balance I'm going to have within my day so that I can get this wisdom of heart? But what happens, and one of the things we talked about in this little small group that I was a part of, that eating, being at the table, all of that tends to be an afterthought. One of the worst food terms that has ever come about has been the word fast food. God never wanted food to be fast. It wasn't supposed to be fast. Okay. And people talk so much about mindfulness and meditation and everything, but there's no place where we can be more that the one place that offers us mindfulness every single day, 3 times a day, is the table. Okay. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. So what are my objectives? So we're going to look and see, and we're going to remind ourselves that there's a sacred rhythm and a holy order to our life. We're going to see what is healthy life body rhythm, what is ritual, look a little bit at the hierarchy of human needs, and then be able to, you'll have a chance, or you'll have one of the slides is something you can use to assess your own personal attention to body, mind, and spirit rhythm, and see how you can now start incorporating this into your life. In Sirach, it says, "My child, treat yourself well according to your means. Do not deprive yourself of the day's enjoyment." So you see that there, which says Evangelii Gaudium. It's actually one of the writings of the Pope. It's Pope Francis, and it's like what that means is the joy is what it is. So it's the evangelism of it's a joy. That's what it is. So Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything under the sun. Songs that y'all remember probably from Godspell was "For Every Season," turn, turn, turn. This is just so amazing, but we forget it. But our life is lived in a rhythm. Our life is not a straight line. Our life isn't coming from here to there. We have our ups and downs in life. And we want to judge everything as good, bad, or anywhere in between. But God has no duality. There is no duality in God. God does not care whether you're rich or poor or healthy or unhealthy or known or unknown. But more importantly, how do we live every season of our life as a way to get closer to God? And most everybody knows, if we reflect back on our life, that our closeness to God has typically happened in more depth when we're more in the depth of our soul than when everything in our life is going happy clappy. And that is the time we may forget God. So there's an appointed time for everything, and a time for every affair under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot the plant. As we know, scripturally, die doesn't just mean the physical death. There are times in our life, probably you'll notice it, all of us, about every 7 years or so, we need to die to something so that something new can rise in our life. If we look at just the passion of Jesus, or that Paschal mystery, which is the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus, what happens all of the time, we have to die to some aspect of our life. It must be buried. We need to let it ascend and go its own way, so that then we can receive the Spirit. That's why Jesus told Mary Magdalene, "Do not hold on to me. For if you hold on to me, I cannot send you the Holy Spirit, which will teach you and remind you everything that I taught." So it's all about learning this in the new way. If we keep holding on to what we knew, and we do, this is what grief is all about. We hold on. I'm not ready to let go of this. But until we let go, we can't see the new life that's in front of us and that's already growing and we're getting the Spirit for. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to embrace and a time to be far from embrace, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. All of this is true in our life. We tend to want to only, and as Americans, I'm sure it's probably this way in other cultures too, but we just want it to be that part that's just like, I don't want to have to go into any of this mess. But as we get older, and I think that's one of the things, I know, like being in my 60s now, it's like another shoe will drop. There's something else that's going to happen, But as we know about those theological virtues of faith, hope, and love, that every time something that drops and we get through it with God, we know that God will get us through it also and bring meaning to what this is. So learn from me, for I'm meek and humble of heart. We see this in Matthew. So Jesus had a ritual and a rhythm to his days. In his ritual rhythm, his joy was restored. So we see restore throughout the scriptures. What does restore mean? Restore means, if you look it up in Webster's dictionary, it means to bring back to health and vigor and to bring back to the original condition. Bring back to original condition. So we are restored. So Jesus honored his traditions of the Sabbath. He prayed alone, but he also prayed and worshiped in community. And he went away to rest. He tells us to do all of this. He dined at table and he ate from God's bounty. One of my favorite scriptures is one of the Eucharistic scriptures where Jesus says, have all of the people recline and I will feed those that are reclining. Okay. Jesus doesn't say, have all the people run around, get in their cars, go to Taco Bell, and I will feed them while they're eating their tacos on the way to work and cussing at everybody on the street. Doesn't say that, right? So I will feed those that are reclining, who have slowed down and who have stopped and let me feed them. Jesus walked. Jesus enjoyed the company of families and friends, and he also enjoyed his crafts. He was a carpenter, who was a master storyteller, and he was a teacher. So we're all called to do the same. So what is ritual and rhythm? It's a set well-known patterns which provide a pleasing and emotionally reassuring sense of social belonging. So what in the heck does that mean? Okay, so I liken it to like a preschool class. If you had a preschool class and you had no order and no ritual in it, it would be chaos, all right? But those children feel very, very safe because they know what to do. They come into the class, they hang their backpack up, and they go and they cross their legs and crisscross applesauce, and they sit in circle time and they get ready for the teacher to tell them what they need to do, right? So they know that, and it feels good to know that this is what I need to do, right? So these rituals and rhythms, which we'll talk about in here, are things that are fundamental to our life, that because in our hurry-a-day world, because we're now following the ritual and rhythm of technology and our jobs, we have lost these pieces, and we're all the worse because of it. This is why we're seeing inflammation and stress and high blood pressure and all the other things. It's not just because of the food that we're eating. It's the lifestyle that we're leading. So joy is found when we honor ritual and rhythm. And we find this in presence, process, and paradox. We hear God. So we have two sides of our brain. We have one part, which is the logical part, the part that tells us what to do, what order to do it in. But we also have this other part, which is that part of God that says, to come away for a while and rest. Okay. So to be in presence, how many of us are ever in the present moment? We're always thinking what's getting ready to happen, and we're mulling over what just happened, and we're never in the present moment. We're never sitting in presence. But when we are sitting in presence, that's why I think when we're at the beach or we're on vacation or whatever, and we can get in that present moment, there's just this feeling within our bodies that all will be well. All will be well, all will be well, all matter of things will be well. And then I just got back from a beach retreat, and it's like, oh, everything was just great there. So now I just went through this week, and it's like, oh my God. And I struggle just as much as you guys do. It's like, what am I have for lunch? I can't believe I scheduled patients all the way through lunch. Why did I do that? I should know this by now, but it still happens. It just still happens with us because our minds are so programmed. So in Zechariah, we say, rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion, shout, O daughter Jerusalem, behold, your king comes to you. He is just and having salvation, humble and riding on a donkey. So what is a donkey? The symbolism of a donkey in scripture means slow. It means stubborn, means lots of things like that, but it's not like fast, like a horse, right? It's something that's slow, methodical. We move through our life so quickly that we don't even recognize ourselves or anybody else around us. And then we get into this hurry mode, And anybody that comes up and tries to bug our hurry mode, we just want to yell at them. And, you know, because you're bugging me and you're slowing me down and I don't want to be bugged and I don't want to be slowed down. Don't you see? I'm very important. I've got to go and do this thing, right? So we get into this mess and we're no longer living in rhythm. So our bodies were designed for ritual and rhythm. We have a light dark cycle. We sleep at night and we rise by day. I do feel sorry for the people that have to work at night or in the evenings, like nurses or people that keep our electricity going and all those other kinds of things. But I'm also very grateful for them too. We need to pray for people that do this, okay, that work in the middle of the evening and keep the world going. And it comes with a cost when people do work night shift. It is not easy because the body was just really not really generally made that way. So we have a heart that beats and lungs that breathe. That has a rhythm. Our heart beats about 60 to 80 beats a minute. You know, if our heart's going too fast, maybe we just exercise, maybe we just drank coffee or someone who smoked, whatever, or maybe we're anxious about something that's getting ready to happen, or maybe I have white coat syndrome and when I go to the doctor, it goes faster, right? We have lungs that breathe about 12 to 20 breaths in a minute and normally, right? So when we go to the doctor's going to ask you questions. How are you sleeping? Are you drinking water? Any complaints? How are you eating? What's your weight? What's your blood pressure? Now, I will tell you this, weight has become something that's become so scary for so many people because this has been one way that some people cope. And it's not just how some people cope, it's also just all of the foods that we have now. It makes it much easier for that weight to happen. But people that are overweight have been talk about vilified when they go to the doctor. It's like they don't even want to go because someone's going to be said something about their weight or whatever. And so what I teach my clients to say, I don't want to be weighed. You know, I know that's one of my struggles. I don't want you to talk about it. I just want you to tell us what we're dealing with and whatever. So because there's a lot of shame associated with that. And then any specific complaints or problems that we may be having. So I asked this question about how do we cope living in a world of ICU psychosis, intensive care unit psychosis, and I'm going to explain what that means in a second. But in Evangelii Gaudium, it says, I can say that the most beautiful and natural expressions of joy, which I've seen in my life, were in the poor people who have little to hold on to. I also think of the real joy shown by others who, even amid pressing professional obligations, were able to preserve in detachment and simplicity a heart full of faith. I just had to write a letter to one of my former clients. She wanted me to write a letter to Christian healthcare workers that were graduating and what would I say to them. And what I wanted to bring across to them that more important than the skills that they've learned are the skills of learning to be present to the person in front of you and honor them as a human person with specific temperaments, with fears and certain other things that go along with them, and honor that first and foremost. And don't just make it that I'm just going to go through this rubric. Because there's nothing scarier than sitting in an office where you feel out of control. But what is this ICU psychosis? So I'm going to explain this to you. But in the intensive care unit, most of us have never been in there. My husband has worked in that for years. He's a critical care pharmacy specialist. He retired about a year or so ago. And our daughter does the same thing. But back in September, my husband found himself in the intensive care unit because he had a stroke. He's fine now. We're 8 months into this. It's great. He's all good. But he got to see what they call in their line of work, being on the other side of the door, all right? Being on the other side of the door, you have lost all control. There's things beeping all the time. You've got things are taking your blood pressure. You got people taking your blood. They're sponging you down in the middle of the night. It is nuts. And we can get what's called ICU psychosis, meaning that I lost control over my life. I have no ritual of my day or night rhythm because to these people in here, everything's day. They're still doing their work and I'm trying to get some sleep, right? So why do I bring that up? And what does that mean? I love this. It says, as expected, the USA takes the gold in synchronized tweeting. no, synchronized tweeting. So this is where we've come to, this has become our life. The children of today, I feel so badly for them because many of the kids I'm working with now don't even want to go get their driver's license. And when you ask them about their socializing life, they go, oh yeah, Saturday night I get together with my friends. Where do you guys go? Oh, we don't go anywhere. I stay home and they stay home and we talk to each other on our computers, So it's like it's becoming something that's really almost is this scary, okay? And so this is what our response is, just like in the intensive care unit, the responses that we now have are to this piece of machinery. I remember telling my daughter when I got an iPhone, I said, Melanie, I have ADD now. I have ADD. This phone has made me have ADD. And she goes, Mom, it's a phone. You can control that. But we as human beings have been made for research and finding things and Google it and whatever, right? Even the whole touch screen things, I'm getting so dang confused. Is this a touch screen or not a touch screen? I can't read that on the paper because I'm almost 65 years old. Let me make the paper bigger. Well, you can't make the paper bigger. I can make my screen bigger, but it's like all these things, it's like it's messing with our heads, right? Messing with our humanness. So what has happened is because of our technologies, the phones that we have, I don't care whether you have a Samsung, an iPhone, whatever it is, it's beeping all the time. It's telling us you have an email. It's telling you you have a text. It's telling you that there's another great Instagram thing to read, whatever it is constantly trying to get our attention. And every time those things beep, we have a rise of adrenaline. Oh my God, emergency, danger, Will Robinson, right? And every time that happens, we are actually stimulating that fight or flight within our body and increasing our body's inflammation. My husband and I, we do not sleep with the cell phone in our bedroom. We don't. And I had to get over that when my kids were younger. I was like, you know what? If I do, I'm just going to worry, I said, but okay, well, what if they cannot go to hold of me? I said, my parents did not have cell phones to wait for us. They had a phone attached to a wall and it worked for them somehow. So we've become overly reliant on this piece of technology so much that we're out of what our humanness is. Okay, so we really need to think about that. So our technological society has succeeded in multiplying occasions of pleasure, different than joy, yet has found it very difficult to engender joy. So what is pleasure? And those pleasure receptors within our mind are what we call those dopamine receptors that get turned on by chocolate cake and ice cream and heroin and alcohol and all these things that make us go into this pleasure cycle. What's also being turned on is every time somebody answers our tweet or gives us a like, or there's something else that comes out of there, it's stimulating those dopamine receptors. And so we are creating more and more and more of dopamine receptors that want to be filled. They're incredibly, what do I want to say? They're greedy. They want more and more and more of you, okay? So once we've done that, when we stop doing what we were doing to increase those dopamine receptors, we start feeling flat. We don't know what to do, whatever. And so what do? We go back to whatever that addiction was, but we need it to come back down to its lower level. So what this picture is showing is that when my body says I have indigestion, I don't try to look into my body and say, body, why do you have indigestion? Oh, it's because you ate 5 pieces of pizza before you went to bed last night. Or you had that fight with that person before you went to bed at night, or whatever it may be. Instead, our drug world has answers for it. Take antacids, take Prilosec, take a sleep medicine, do whatever it is, but don't sit there and find out what the problem is, okay? So as I said, our body is at the service of our head, okay? And we need to come back, and if our body is saying something, we need to find out, what are you saying, body? What am I not seeing? We have a fast food nation. Fast food, I said before, it shouldn't be fast food. If you even look at that food, you can see that versus what I showed you in the Mediterranean diets, this is devoid of nutrition. I can look at those French fries and I can look at that hamburger and they are anemic, all right? They have no nutritional value in them. You can see that. I'm not saying they don't have a place. Sometimes that's what I want. Okay. But if this is our diet all the time, my body will revolt. I promise you it will. And we're going to look for every which way but loose, then look for what I'm doing with my diet. I'm going to go get treated for all these things when it really is, can you stop eating hamburgers from whatever the fast food establishment is every single day? Right? We look for the most complicated things. So let's step back and look at what our hierarchy of needs are. What do we need? Our Christian joy drinks of the wellspring of his brimming heart. So in this hierarchy of needs, and if you look this up, you can get pictures of it, you can see pyramids of it. This is what Maslow described as what we as human beings need. The basics of the hierarchy of needs is we all need safety and survival. As parents, our job is to make sure our kids feel safe, make sure they have a roof over their head, and make sure that they have the food that they need to eat. But as I told you in the last presentation, above and beyond that is our human contact. This is the attachment that we have to the humans in our life as children, particularly to our parents, okay? We need that love to survive. And then the other parts of the hierarchy of needs is I need someone to validate me and to affirm me and to listen to me. I need to be part of something bigger than myself. I need to be accepted for who I am. It's like the Velveteen Rabbit. You know, Velveteen Rabbit was all upset because he didn't think that anybody liked him because this was falling off and that was falling off. But in the end, that was the most loved, you know. As we get older and older, things are starting to, you know, sag and everything else. But many times an older, well-adjusted person who loves themselves and who loves God, no matter how many wrinkles they have, they're more comfortable to be around than that person that's perfect figure, perfect body, perfect whatever. Okay. And the reason why is because they've become comfortable with who they are. Okay. And they're able to offer dominion to others and not try to dominate people by being better, faster, whatever. So I encourage you to look up that hierarchy of needs, you know, at another time, but find out where you may not be meeting your needs in life. So that may be causing you to use food, alcohol, or whatever else to fulfill those needs, which it will never fulfill. So the joy of healthy eating, this is the first parameter we'll look at. So in Acts, we see that they ate their food with glad and generous hearts. Right now, a lot of the scriptures are from Acts. It's the people after the resurrection of Jesus who are forming the church, and they had everything in common. They shared their foods, but they ate their food with glad and generous hearts. Okay, I'm sharing my food with the hungry, right? So we need to ask ourselves questions. What does my body say about the foods I'm eating? Does my stomach hurt? Sometimes your stomach may hurt. Like for me, it took me years to realize that I had a garlic intolerance. I am Italian. That's really very cruel and unusual punishment for someone that's Italian. However, I figured it out and realized that garlic is very overrated, and there's other people that have these issues too, and I can still enjoy my Italian food without garlic in it, you know. So you need to first figure out, is it a food allergy? Is it a food intolerance? Or is it that I am eating foods that are just not good for me? Are they too high in fat? Are they too high in salt? Are they too high in GMOs? Whatever it may be, what is the reason why my stomach hurts? Don't just take the medicine because your stomach hurts. Try to figure out the basis of it. Because your body's the temple of God and it's trying to speak to you. Am I gaining weight? It's fine if I want to gain weight, but if I don't want to gain weight, what's the reason? I will tell you, any of you women that are in menopause and any men that are in your, you know, over 50, that our bodies do have a lower metabolic rate and you will gain weight quicker than you used to. That's just what happens. And so we just need less calories to accommodate that. But also the body, as we get older, is also trying to put more fat on the body. I just learned this because I take my mom to the doctor, but even in our brain, God is so amazing that we get a bigger fat layer, a ring around our brain, just in case we were to fall, to protect our head. I mean, it's fascinating. I broke both of my arms a couple of years ago, riding a horse that bucked me. And I was very grateful for the kind of the fat pads that I had around my hips, because I didn't break my hips. What I broke was because I fell over 5 feet. I broke the collarbone and I broke my wrist. But I was protected and I had a helmet on. So all that protected the other parts of my body. So I'm saying some of the aspects of gaining weight. And the other piece of it is as we get older and maybe we do start declining in our eating, we need more fat on our bodies to supply food to us when we may not be able to supply our own food through eating. Do I eat with the rhythm of my body? Am I eating when I'm hungry and stopping when I'm full? Am I denying my hunger signals? All of those kinds of things. What is that rhythm of my body? Every one of us gets hungry for food probably about every 3 to 4 hours. It's no different than when we were babies. That's from a normal meal. A Thanksgiving meal, you may not be hungry for 8 hours because you ate so much, but that's what we do on Thanksgiving. That's what we do on Christmas. That's when we're supposed to do that, okay? Do I embrace my senses when I eat? Do I, think about the taste and the smell and the crunch, all of that that goes along with the eating? Most of us are not even embracing any of that. We're eating so fast. It should take us 20 minutes or more to eat a meal. It takes 20 minutes for my head to tell my stomach it's full. Most of us consume a meal in 7 minutes. Do I starve myself and do I skip meals? Many people skip breakfast. Sometimes they'll skip lunch. The reason why we can get away with it is because I'm moving and shaking throughout the day. And then about anywhere from 3 to 5 o'clock, or by the time I get home, then I binge all night long because I didn't give myself what I needed earlier in the day. I spend so much time with people on this about restructuring their meals where they have a breakfast, lunch, a dinner, and maybe some snacks in there. How does eating affect my socialization? Am I eating with others? Am I not eating with others because I don't want people to judge my eating or judge my body size or whatever? How is that affecting that? Eating can be a social endeavor. And do I find joy in eating? There are some people that really eat to live. They're not like me. They don't love to eat. They don't live to eat. They eat to live. Okay. There are some people like that, and that is great. I remember I asked my husband one time, do you want a snack? And he said, no, I'm not hungry. That has nothing to do with wanting to eat snack, but he's a little bit more, can do that way. He's also someone, if he hasn't eaten, he's got 2 freaking stomachs. He can eat twice as much as I can, which I can't do that. I have to space mine out. Joy of the table. This is one of my absolute favorite scriptures. It's what Jesus said. He said, I have been eagerly desired to eat this Passover meal with you before I suffer. Do you think he really wanted to eat before he went and sweated blood and got scourged and went on the cross? Honestly, really? Do you think he wanted that? What was it really about? He needed to be fed with the love of the people around that table to give him the courage to be able to go and do what he needed to do. It wasn't about the food, okay? So at the table is when we commune with God, with nature, and our companions. Companion means componis, the person whom I share my bread with, okay? That's both bread and food, bread and spirit. And this is where I find joy. This is why I tell families that the family table is not made by everybody getting their different meals at different places and eating separate meals. You've already separated yourself. That's okay sometimes, but for the most part, we want to share of the same loaf, okay? Sharing of the same loaf is something that's communicated without words, that we are eating together, and we have a commonality even in the food that we're eating. We allow Jesus to feed us. We're not grabbers, okay? We have gotten to this point that we grab our food and we can take care of this and we don't need Jesus. We need to relax. We need to recline. We need to be fed, and we need to restore that natural body rhythm, slow it down, okay? It's our threshold throughout the day, right? Slow down, find joy. It's a time we pray. One of the times is the only time that maybe a family might pray together. It's a time to converse, and it's a time to communicate. It's not a time for discipline. It is a time to teach manners, okay? And manners are how we live in the world with other people, okay? But we've lost what manners really are. Okay, the excuse me, the pardon me, all of those things. We need to come back to what these manners are. Pass me the this, pass me the that, right? In my family, we couldn't even put stuff on our plate until we had said prayers when I was growing up. So and there was a lot of people in my family. So you set the spoon towards you that you wanted. So as soon as prayers were like, you jumped on that spoon, So, I mean, in my family, the chicken was a carcass at the end, So you had to get what you could during that time. But we appreciated our meals, very, very much. Offer thanksgiving for what we have. Step away from technology. No phones at the table. I cannot stand it when things are beeping and everybody's getting up and answering things or whatever. You've not done what the table is. And it provides that threshold throughout the day and helps us to find joy. So we need to ask ourselves the question, why don't I eat at the table? Maybe I need to buy a table. When I used to do home visits, I'd go to people's houses and they would have just stuff all over the table. I knew they weren't eating at that table. They were eating in front of the TV trays, whatever. And there's a place for that. That's fine. And what modifications do I need to do to eat at the table? The next is the joy of exercise. And I may change this to physical activity. Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? This is, of course, the road to Emmaus. Two people are walking. They're actually going to Emmaus. One of my favorite authors, Father Ron Rolheiser, talks about Emmaus is essentially the equivalent of Las Vegas, like they were just going somewhere else because this didn't really work out very well, so I'm going to go off to what I was doing, or I'm going to go off, somewhere else. But Jesus turned them around and said, go back to where it was started. Go back to the beginning. Go back and tell my brothers that you have seen me. The point to this is that did you know that a healthy body requires 30 to 60 minutes of activity a day? And I say it's 60 minutes minimum, people, 60 minutes. And even if you do 60 minutes of physical activity a day, you are still a sedentary person that does 60 minutes of exercise a day. Don't really, Lord, say, give yourself a crown by any stretch of the imagination. You did 60 minutes. You can break it up during the day. You can do whatever. And don't eat because you exercise. That's another huge mistake. In order to run off a piece of cheesecake that's 900 calories, it would take you probably 2 intense spin classes to do that. Okay. So we don't exercise to eat. We move because our body requires that. The people in the blue zone move constantly all day long. They mix cakes by hand. They go out to their gardens. It's a constant movement. They do not exercise. They just move. What keeps me from being active? Why is activity important? The human body was made to move, to tend gardens, for food, to work, and to encounter Christ in all of this. It does the body good. It restores that rhythm of our body. It restores stress and balance. It reduces stress and restores balance. It's a way to connect as a family. This is a great way to talk to kids when you're walking, because they're looking straight forward. And I find I'll do counseling this way too, where I'll walk with people, and more comes out in walking than it does sitting around a table, because your body is just in this active mode. And there's just something about being out in nature that feeds us. It releases tension. It's a time to spend in creation, and it's a way to find joy. We should not have vitamin D deficiency in a developed country. It's ludicrous. But why does it happen? Is because most people do not go outside, even for 20 minutes a day. And we don't need some of the food groups that have vitamin D in it, but most of it is by not going outside. The joy of sleep. Do I get 8 hours of sleep a day? In our age groups, all of us, we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I always told my kid, don't you mess with my sleep, my kids. If I took a nap, I said, do not knock on that door unless there is blood. There must be blood to knock on that door. Okay. They knew my naps were important. And I remember my daughter asking me one time, she said, Mom, what are you and Nona and your sister's going to do on your vacation? Are you going to have napping contests? I said, we may. I said, but that's up to us. It's our girls' vacation. We can do whatever we want, right? So as children are younger, toddlers may need close to 14 hours of sleep a day. But we as human beings need 7 to 9. We need to figure out what's keeping me from getting my sleep. Do I relax before I go to bed? What keeps me from that? But with a tenderness which never disappoints, but is always capable of restoring our joy, he makes it possible for us to lift up our heads and to start anew. I think that's so beautiful that we start new every day. And I always tell people, if you get off track on your food the day before, I always tell myself, if I didn't give myself meals and now I'm in my binging phase, I say, you know what? I just got to go to bed and start over tomorrow. Literally, your body resets. It just resets and you can start over the right way the next day. We become fully human when we let God bring us beyond ourselves in order to attain the fullest truth of our being. So everybody needs to create. Everybody was meant to create. It doesn't mean you're an artist. It doesn't mean whatever, but we all can do something fun. And I told people, if you want to just have something fun, get a coloring book, not an adult coloring book. I think those are the worst things in the world. Everybody probably likes those, but to me, they're too stressful. I like a big frog, completely huge thing that the frog takes up the whole space on that page. I can color that frog. I don't got to think about everything else. And if I want to color that frog purple, I can color that frog purple. Okay. But there's something about just the movement and writing. Just writing in a journal is a great thing too to do. Strengthens that part of the brain that's presence, process, and paradox. Okay. It's the language of the heart. Our heart understands in symbol and metaphor. It's a pre-verbal language. That's why Jesus spoke in symbol and metaphor. Okay, that's why Jesus spoke in symbol and metaphor. A tree is scripture. It is scripture. There's so much a tree can teach you. Sit outside, lean against a tree and say, what do you have to teach me today? And you will be taught what you need to be taught. Joy of relationships. With God's love, which blossoms into enriching friendships, we are liberated from the narrowness, our narrowness and self-absorption. This is my fear of the generations that we have now that are not developing relationships. Being in communion with another person, kids playing games together, all of these things, not on a computer. You know, if you play Legos with somebody and the person didn't like what you built and they knocked it down, it takes a lot to rebuild that. First of all, you have to go through conflict resolution and see, why in the heck did you knock my Lego tower down? All right. I got to figure out how to build this thing back up again. Right. Versus if you each are building your Lego tower on your computer, there's not a relationship there. Okay. But relationships also happen around the table. They happen around the table. We need to speak lovingly to ourselves. This is a big criticism that most of us don't do for ourselves. When you look at yourself in the mirror, believe me, as we get older, it's easy to say, oh my God, what are those circles under your eyes? Where in the heck did they come from? But if I complain about that, instead I can say, you know what, self? You have those circles under your eyes. I wonder if we're getting enough rest. I wonder if we're doing too much. Practice compassion to yourself. Write great things on the mirror. Just say, you rock. You had a great day yesterday. You know, people love you. I love you, whatever it is. Use those kind of markers, you know, that you can erase, dry erase markers. You can write on your mirror with that. Respect yourself and others. Be present and listen to yourself and others. Listen to your body. And loving relationships helps us find joy, decreases loneliness in ourselves. Most of us are lonely because we're separated from ourselves and we're separated from the source of ourself, which is God. Nurture yourself. Encourage yourself and others. And the joy of the Sabbath. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. And I realize as pastors and people that work in churches, the Sabbath is the day you work. So there's that challenge to find another day that you will have a full day off. And when I say a full day off, it's not a day to do your laundry. It's not a day to do your grocery shopping. I mean a full day off that you enjoy. Okay. And why do I need Sabbath time? It restores rest. It's a time to rest, renew, and receive wisdom. It restores the body rhythm and allows us, the Creator, to nourish our souls. And it's needed daily, but Sunday or Saturday or whatever day it can be for you, the Lord asks us to receive this gift of rest all day. In Texas, we used to have the blue law. This was back in the 80s. They destroyed the blue law. But when I was a kid, we had the blue law. So Sundays were, and people say, oh, well, you can just create it yourself. And it's like, there's still something about like a day, like maybe Christmas, when everybody is on the same rhythm. You can feel it in the air. You can just feel it, but for the most part, we're going to have to create it ourselves. And so lastly, I have this roadmap to health, which I had suggested that you guys maybe make a copy of or make the slide big, and it's something you could fill out on your own. So if I were to look at this roadmap to health, I see that when I say Sacred Heart Center, what do I mean by that? That's coming to the center of you and to the center of Christ, who lays in the center of our temple, okay? And every part, our body, mind, spirit, and emotions are part of this ritual of life that if we take time to honor them and provide them or let God provide them, we will become centered and everything else in life will fall into place. How do I work on my nutrition? If I need to meet with a dietitian, that's what I do. Or I've given you lots of tools today that you can look and see these are what the bases are. Find out where your problem area is. Don't try to tackle everything at once. Maybe it's just like on Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm going to add vegetables to my lunch. Conquer that for a few weeks. The next week, add another goal in to conquer. Okay. And then maybe an activity. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday, make them specific. This is the SMART goals. I am going to walk around the block 5 times at 6 a.m. You said exactly what you're going to do, and you did it. Okay. Sleep. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I am not going to work on my computer past 5 o'clock, and I am going to lay in bed and be asleep by 10 o'clock. I'm going to see how this works for me. Okay. Think for spirit, for prayer. How am I going to set this? Ideally, we need an hour of Sabbath time a day to be simply with God. It tends to work best in the morning because that's when we're closest to our unconscious life. So closest to our dreams, closest to everything. I take agendas into prayer. If I've got something that's a big day, I bring that agenda into prayer. That's part of my life with God, with Jesus, my CEO, who's going to help me with that. Okay. And it will happen. It will fall out. If I've got a difficult conversation that day, I bring it into there. Learning of the Spirit. Most of you guys, this is your job. You know what that means to learn more, to read more. And our Sabbath. What does our Sabbath look like? Everything from daily Sabbaths to on the weekends. Mind. How am I working my right and my left brain? Most of all, our left brain takes over. That's the logic part. I get things done. But the right brain, how am I really nurturing that? What's my creative life look like? My work. My work pretty much takes on what it needs to be, but we can always learn more and different kinds of learning. Maybe you want to learn something new. Maybe you want to learn how to play the guitar, or maybe you want to learn Spanish, or maybe whatever. Just challenge your mind. It always needs to be growing. And last but not least, our emotions and our self-talk. If we talk mean to ourselves, we're rising up that cortisol in our body. We're just living by the critic. Remember, every critic in your head was created to help you in life, but now has overtaken your life. These critics came about to say, oh my goodness, Kim, don't say that, because remember when your mom used to yell at you when you tried to express your feelings, so just keep those to yourself, right? So it's like we now take over those things. Okay, be perfect. Make sure that nothing falls awry because someone may criticize you or someone may reject you, right? So we need to learn to fire those critics within our head and live as who we are. Relationships. I told you the relationship is you and God, you and your spouse, you and your children, then your vocation, and then your leisure activity. And last but not least, accept feelings. Do not judge a feeling. We have 4 basic emotions: sad, mad, glad, and afraid. And everything branches off of there. Every one of them is a gift from God. There is a poem called by Rumi. It's called The Guest House. I suggest everybody look this up. It's called The Guest House by Rumi. And it says that, invite everybody in. It's like, it might be a meanness, it might be an anger, it might be a whatever. But Rumi says in this, invite everybody in because they've been taught as a guide from beyond to clear your house out and to help you look at something closer. So, okay, I think I did it all. I think I got through it. Oh, yeah, just the last pieces of it are just, that Sacred Heart Center is that place of adoration, thanksgiving, praise, and joy, and then just the summation of it. So
I heard you mention, Laura, as others are writing their questions, when food becomes an extra or tangential to our life, as opposed to an orienting, centering kind of thing that is prayerful, reconnecting us. I think I've heard you say one time, it's a time that can connect us to God, to each other, and to the earth.
correct.
That's
right, yeah.
It itself is a spiritual practice.
Correct. And that's one of the slides within there, is to commune with God, nature, and each other. But so the bivocational piece of it, and I understand and I honor that people have, very, very busy lives. So sometimes that does become a little bit more complicated, but I know, like in my own life, what I put my priorities in, and one of my priorities is always my prayer life. And also my physical activity is a priority for me too. And so I tend to put those in at the beginning of the day, however that might play out. And some people, that may be kind of both, and it might be a way that you commune with God at the same time as you're walking, and that could be a part of your prayer life and those kinds of things as well. So that's what my suggestion is for that. But you have to, and then here's another one: hectic, different, and full family schedules, how to find time together. So what I find the problem with this is that sometimes we are doing too much and causing our kids to do too much. And we as human beings can only handle so much. And if these different activities are taking away from that family table, we need to reconsider what those things are. And like I said, we fell into it. We were probably one of the first generations where this, everybody's kid is going to be an Olympian mentality came up. And so a kid needs to be in soccer and club soccer and, club piano and, everything else. And so what we ended up doing was we actually ended up having dinner at like 9 o'clock at night, is what we did when our kids came home from gymnastics. But we did it, and it's not what I really recommend. I recommend that we need to just start standing our ground against some of these things that are making it too hard for our kids' schedules. So, and I'm not saying it's easy, because believe me, I'm a parent too, and I remember those schedules. But what I will say is none of these things are more important than finding time for the family table, at least maybe 2 days a week. At least find time for it, maybe not every day, but find it as often as you can. And it may even be that sometimes that family table does not have everybody around it, because there are other ones that had to go out and do different things, but find a modification.
Okay, good.
Okay, guilt. Oh, how do you deal with the guilt when you do not stay consistent in living out with the Sabbath? I think there's a difference between false guilt and true guilt. Okay. And if you're guilting yourself into this, I think it's really a false guilt. I don't think it's of God. But it's just something that you pray for. I mean, I think we can always pray to God to open up the space in our life and show us a way that we may not have seen before. Okay. So those things can happen. And each time we are unable to do it is a time that we can reevaluate. So it's not about perfection. Okay. It's about the desire.
So we're going to move now into just some closing reflections and an exercise. I want to raise a question now for you to consider. 3 questions, and then we'll move into a closing practice together. We change most powerfully in community. It's not just me doing this, but it's with a group of people. So what would you like to discuss with your affinity group? If you've got a tablet or a journal, you don't have to say it aloud, but I just want to invite you. We change in community. What is it, something from today you would like to discuss with your affinity group, or a challenge you would like to take up together? Question 2 to consider: what might you like to pursue with your coach? could be a practice, something to implement, that seems hard or challenging or difficult. Think of all the good things you've tackled with your coaches already. In ministry, it'd be something very basic, like getting a regular meal time or doing some meal prep ahead of time. And lastly, what does this bring up in your relationship with God? What's something you want to explore with your spiritual director here? Is there something from today that you want to talk about with your spiritual director that this brings up for you? I'll tell you a fun little story and to set up the closing exercise, which is what we began, the breath prayer. The executive coordinator for the nonprofit I lead, Flourishing Leaders, Laura Laine, her family, they adopted two children, one from China. He's in 5th grade and they had a 5th grade performance. And he decided, very shy young man, he decided that he was going to do a magic show for the talent show for his elementary school. And it was going to be a magic show and he wanted to do coin magic. And he cries regularly, just that's the way that he shows emotion. It can be joy, it can be sadness, but he cries regularly. And so they were so proud of him that he was going to perform for his magic show. And he practiced his coin magic to do in front of the whole elementary school. And they practiced his jokes he was going to tell while he was up there. And the family, his brothers, his sisters, his mom and dad, they were holding their breath as he was up there doing his tricks and telling his jokes, thinking, is he going to just break out in tears and not be able to finish the show? But he held it together. This was just the other night. He held it together and did all the tricks, did all the jokes, got applause. And at the end of the show, he actually got the People's Choice Award. So the whole crowd, voted for him for some award. And afterwards, his mom and dad were looking at each other. That was amazing. He didn't burst out into tears. And they go up to congratulate him after, and he just fell apart in their arms and started crying and said, "Oh, you did so good. We're so proud of you." And he was joyful because he had actually even won this award. And he said, "How did you do it? You held it together through the whole thing." And he said, I practiced that breath prayer that you taught me. The Lord is with me. I will not fear. And he did that going up into the program. And he said he did it the whole time while he was doing his magic tricks and showing it. Isn't that beautiful? Little 5th grade boy from China doing that and made it through. So here we are, closing our time together. I want to post Psalm 116:7, returning to a place of safety and peace. The Lord is our home. Breathe in, let my soul be at rest again. For the Lord has been good to me. In breath, let my soul be at rest again. For the Lord has been good to me. One more time. Let my soul be at rest again. For the Lord has been good to me. I just bless you today to enjoy all the ways that the Lord will nourish you, be it of rest, of eating good, nourishing, colorful food, to enjoy all the ways that the Lord is sustaining you. I bless you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Look forward to gathering with you guys again soon.